Sophia Morgan woke with a gasp, her body drenched in sweat, primal desire exploding through her veins. The first heat in 9 years had begun. Her skin felt aflame, every nerve ending, painfully sensitive, as she clutched at her sheets. The digital clock on her nightstand glowed 2:17 a.m., its harsh red numbers cutting through the darkness of her bedroom. She had known something was wrong yesterday when the suppressants she'd taken religiously for almost a decade had failed to quiet the building tension in her body. Now that tension had erupted into full biological imperative, and she was completely unprepared. Sophia stumbled from her bed to the bathroom, turning the shower to cold. She stood beneath the icy spray, hoping to douse the fire spreading through her limbs. It only made things worse. The water droplets felt like electric shocks against her hypersensitized skin. She turned off the shower, bracing herself against the marble countertop, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes had changed. The usual calm green had brightened, almost glowing with the telltale sheen of an omega in heat. Her cheeks were flushed, lips parted, as she tried to control her rapid breathing. At 28 years old, Sophia was experiencing what most omegas went through at 16. The difference was teenagers had families to guide them through the process. She had no one. 9 years. 9 years of careful chemical suppression to build the life she wanted. 9 years of independence as a respected architect at one of Boston's premier firms. 9 years of pretending she wasn't what biology had determined her to be, all undone in a single night. Sophia wrapped herself in a robe and returned to her bedroom, grabbing her phone. She pulled up the emergency Omega Clinic information with trembling fingers. They had services precisely for situations like this. Injectable inhibitors that could force her body back into suppression. Emergency protocols designed for unmated omegas in crisis. The number rang 3 times before a woman answered. Emergency Omega Services. How can we help? Sophia tried keeping her voice steady. I need an emergency appointment. My suppressants have failed and I'm currently in acute heat. The pause on the other end of the line felt interminable. When was your last suppressant dose? 3 days ago, the regular schedule I've maintained for years. And you haven't taken a dose since then? No, I woke up in heat. I need the emergency inhibitor immediately. The woman's voice shifted to something that sounded almost pitying. Miss, I need to be honest with you. During a heat surge this intense, an inhibitor won't stop the cycle. What it will do is suppress your pheromone output and dampen your biological receptivity. It won't stop you from feeling the need, but it will give you back some mental clarity and reduce the likelihood of an alpha being attracted to you. Something cracked inside Sophia's chest. Not stop it, only mask it. How soon can I get an appointment? Our first opening is tomorrow afternoon at 3. Tomorrow. She would have to endure this state for over 12 hours. That's not acceptable. There has to be something earlier. I'm sorry, we're booked solid this morning with emergencies. When a batch of suppressants goes bad, we see a spike in cases. You're not the only one this happened to. Sophia thanked the woman and hung up, staring blankly at her phone screen. She had to make it through today. She had to go to work, had to maintain her normal appearance, had to function like a regular person while her body was literally on fire with need. She could do this. People did this. There were unsuppressed omegas all over the world managing their heat cycles. She could manage one day. She just had to avoid alphas, stay in a cool environment, and keep moving so she didn't have time to dwell on the ache. The morning crawled by in excruciating slowness. Sophia showered again, dressed in layers to absorb the sweat her body kept producing, and tried to eat breakfast. Nothing would stay down. Her stomach was too twisted with need, too focused on the singular biological imperative that had taken over her body. As she was gathering her things to leave for work, a scent hit her through her apartment window. It was subtle at first, just a whisper on the air, but her omega senses locked onto it immediately. Spice, leather, dark cedar, something uniquely male that made her entire body clench with desperate need. An alpha, a powerful alpha somewhere nearby. And her heat-addled brain was screaming at her to find him, to offer herself, to end this ache that was building to unbearable levels. She pressed her palm against the cool glass window, trying to ground herself. She lived in a downtown Boston apartment building, surrounded by hundreds of people. That alpha scent could be coming from the building next door, from the street below, from anywhere in a several-block radius, and she absolutely could not go looking for it. Sophia forced herself away from the window, gathering her portfolio and keys. Professional, independent, controlled. These were the qualities that had defined her adult life. One biological hiccup wasn't going to change that. She would go to work, focus on the riverfront development project, and pretend everything was normal until she could get to the clinic tomorrow. The drive downtown was torture. Every red light felt like an invitation to lose control. Every strong alpha scent that drifted through her car window made her grip the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. By the time she pulled into the office parking garage, she was barely holding on to her composure. Morgan and Reed Architecture occupied the 15th floor of a gleaming glass tower in Boston's financial district. Sophia had worked her way up from junior designer to lead architect over 6 years, earning respect for her innovative, sustainable designs and precise technical knowledge. The modern open-plan office usually felt like a second home. Today, it felt like a minefield. Morning, Sophia. Her colleague Derek nodded as she passed his desk. The client meeting for Riverfront is at 11, conference room A. She forced a smile. Thanks for the reminder. She made it to her desk, stored her things, and tried to focus on the work in front of her. The Riverfront development was a prestigious project, a mixed-use complex along the Charles River that could define her career. She pulled up the file and stared at it blankly, unable to process the information her eyes were taking in. After 20 minutes of staring at the same schematic, Derek wandered over, coffee in hand. You feeling okay, Sophia? You look kind of flushed. Sophia straightened in her chair. Just a little off today. I think I'm fighting something. You should probably go home. Get some rest. Home, where she could be alone, where she could give in to the desperation without an audience. I'll be fine, she gave him a reassuring smile. The Riverfront presentation is too important to miss. Derek shrugged and returned to his desk. Sophia turned back to her computer screen, trying to ignore the waves of heat pulsing through her body. She was not going to let her biology override her choices. She was a rational person. She was independent. She was not going to become one of those omega women who lost themselves in the desperation of their heat cycles. By mid-morning, the scent was getting closer. That same alpha from earlier, and now the scent was definitely in the building. Sophia's heat-addled brain was starting to rebel against her attempts at rational control. Her body wanted to find him, wanted to offer itself, wanted to experience the kind of bonding that her suppressants had kept her from even imagining. She gripped her desk and forced herself to breathe. She was not going to do this. She was not going to let biology override her choices. Around 10:45, there was a commotion in the office. People were standing up, looking toward the elevators, and Sophia heard someone whisper a name that made her blood run cold. Dominic Blackwood. As in Dominic Blackwood, the CEO and founder of Blackwood Enterprises, one of the most powerful alpha kings in the Northeast. He was visiting their firm probably for the Riverfront development meeting. The project was being financed by Blackwood Investments, but she hadn't expected the CEO himself to attend. Sophia absolutely could not see him right now, could not be in the same room as him. She stood up, intending to head to the bathroom to hide, but it was too late. He was already stepping out of the elevator with an entourage of executives, and Sophia felt her body freeze in absolute primal terror and desire. The presence hit her like a physical force. She had felt powerful alphas before, had learned to navigate their energy while suppressed. But this was different. This was an alpha so powerful that the air around him seemed to shimmer with raw dominance. He was tall, devastatingly handsome, with salt and pepper hair that only enhanced his authoritative presence. Deep-set eyes that seemed to see everything at once. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than she made in a month, and he moved with a confidence that came from knowing that everyone in the room would obey him without question. And her heat-soaked body was reacting to him with an intensity that made her legs weak. She gripped her desk to stay upright, trying to make herself small, trying to be invisible. Maybe he wouldn't notice her. Maybe she could just sit here quietly until he left. That hope lasted approximately 5 seconds. Dominic Blackwood stopped mid-sentence in his conversation with the firm's partners. His head turned, his eyes scanning the office floor, and then he stopped, looking directly at her with an expression of such raw intensity that Sophia felt her breath catch. Their eyes met for a long moment. Neither of them moved. Sophia could feel the icy power of his gaze like a physical touch, could feel her body responding with a desperation that made her entire frame tremble. She could also feel something else, something she'd only read about in old books and folklore. The pull of a potential mate bond, the scent she'd been smelling all morning. That had been him. Dominic Blackwood took a step toward her, and that was when Sophia's remaining control shattered completely. She bolted from her desk and headed for the bathroom, moving as quickly as she could without actually running. She locked herself in the stall and sat on the toilet seat with her head between her knees trying to control her breathing. This was not happening. The most powerful alpha in the Northeast was not here in her office, and her body was not reacting to him like her only purpose was to submit and offer herself. She was not going to do this. She was not going to lose herself to her omega nature. She was not going to become the kind of woman who abandoned all independence and rational thought because her biology was screaming at her to bond with an alpha. She just needed to make it through the day, just needed to avoid him for the next few hours until it was late enough that she could go home, take a shower, and then go to the clinic first thing tomorrow morning for the emergency inhibitor. She could manage that. She could absolutely manage that. The problem was that Dominic Blackwood had other plans. She heard the sound of the bathroom door opening and froze. She was in a locked stall, but the presence she felt approaching made her understand immediately who it was. The Alpha King had followed her into the women's bathroom. The territory violation was so shocking that Sophia momentarily forgot about her heat and the desperate need coursing through her body. An alpha following an omega into the bathroom was absolutely unprecedented. It was also incredibly dangerous. "Come out," a deep voice commanded from outside her stall. Not asked, commanded. It held the weight of dominance that made her omega brain want to immediately obey. Sophia gripped the toilet seat and refused to move. "No, you need to leave. This is a women's bathroom and you're an alpha. You shouldn't even be in here." "The only thing I shouldn't be doing is leaving you alone in this state," he replied, and there was something in his voice that suggested he was barely holding on to his own control. "You're in heat. You're trying to hide it, but your scent is making every alpha in this building lose their minds. I'm the strongest one here, which makes it my responsibility to make sure nothing happens to you." "Nothing's going to happen to me. I'm fine." "You're lying." His voice dropped lower. "I can smell the need on you. I can feel it through the air. And you can feel me too, can't you?" He was right. She could feel him. She could feel the pull of the mate bond that her suppressants had prevented her from ever experiencing. She could feel her body literally aching for him, desperate to be close to him, desperate to submit to him in ways that should have terrified her. And they did terrify her. They terrified her so much that she stayed locked in the bathroom stall and refused to answer. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, become something softer and more dangerous. "My name is Dominic. I'm an alpha, yes, but I'm not here to claim you or force you into anything. I'm here because your scent just woke something in me that I've been searching for my entire life, and I'm not going to let you suffer through your heat alone if there's anything I can do to help." He paused, and she could hear him moving closer to the stall door. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to unlock this door. You're going to come out, and you're going to let me take you somewhere private where we can talk about what happens next." The command in his voice was absolute, and her omega instincts screamed at her to obey. Sophia gripped the toilet seat and shook her head even though he couldn't see Bone. "No, I don't know you. I don't want your help. I want you to leave and pretend this never happened." "Can't do that," he said simply. "The mate bond doesn't work that way, and neither do I." She heard a sound that suggested he was leaning against the bathroom door, settling in for a wait. "I can stand out here all day, if that's what it takes, Omega. But eventually you're going to have to come out. Your heat isn't going to resolve on its own. The suppressants you've been taking have been keeping it dormant, but your body is remembering what it's supposed to do, and it's going to escalate every hour you don't address it." His voice softened slightly. "In another few hours, you won't have the mental clarity to refuse me. You'll be too consumed by the need. So we can do this the easy way where you come out now and we talk, or we can do it the hard way where I have to come in there and carry you out. But one way or another, you're not going through this alone." He was probably right. Logically, she knew he was probably right. Her heat would escalate. The desperate need would intensify. She might do something she regretted, But the thought of leaving this bathroom, of being near him, of experiencing the full force of the mate bond without the suppressants to buffer, it was almost worse than the thought of suffering through it alone. Almost. If I come out, Sophia heard herself say, hating how small and desperate her voice sounded, you have to promise me that you're not going to touch me. You're not going to try to bond with me, or claim me, or do whatever it is that alphas do to omegas. You're going to help me get through this, and then we're going to walk away and never see each other again. Silence from outside the stall. I can't promise you that last part, Omega. The mate bond doesn't work that way. But I can promise you that I won't touch you without permission. And I can promise you that I'm not going to force anything, but walking away and never seeing each other again, that's not going to happen. Once the bond forms, once we've made that connection, neither of us will want to. Sophia wanted to argue, wanted to insist that she absolutely would want to walk away, that biology didn't matter and bonds didn't matter, and she was in control of her own choices. But her body was making that increasingly difficult to believe. She was shaking, sweating desperate, and he was right there, his presence like a drug that her body was screaming for. She unlocked the stall door and stepped out immediately, having to grip the sink to stay upright. Dominic was standing with his back to her, deliberately not looking at her. She was grateful for the small mercy. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands were gripped so tightly they were white. Whatever was happening to her was happening to him too. My apartment, she said quietly. If we're going to do this, we need to go somewhere private where no one can see us. My apartment is close by. It's in the Seaport district. Okay, he said, still not turning to look at her. We'll go to your apartment. I'm going to ask my driver to bring the car around. We're going to walk out of this building like professionals, get into the car and go to your place. Can you do that? I don't know, Sophia said honestly. I don't know if I can walk out of here with you without everyone figuring out what's happening. They already know, he said, finally turning to look at her. The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. Your scent is all over this building, and now they've scented me with you. Everyone in this office knows exactly what's happening, but they also know that you're under my protection, which means no other alpha is going to touch you or interfere. Now let's go before my control gets any worse. They made the walk through the office as quickly as possible without actually running. People stared, but no one said anything. Derek looked like he wanted to say something, but one look from Dominic kept him silent. They made it to the elevator, and then to the lobby, and then to the car that was already waiting outside, the driver apparently having received the command to bring it around immediately. Sophia slid into the back seat and Dominic followed her. The moment the door was closed, the pretense of professional distance evaporated. The car smelled like him now, his scent making her skin burn with hypersensitivity. She was shaking, and when she looked over at him, he looked equally affected, his jaw clenched, his hands gripped into fists. How long? He asked quietly. How long has the heat been building? Since midnight, Sophia managed to say. The suppressants I've been taking since I was 19 failed, and I woke up and everything just started. He looked at her, genuine surprise in his expression. You've been suppressed for 9 years. You haven't experienced your heat cycle in 9 years. I didn't want to, she said defensively. It was easier to function without it, without the desperation and the need and the omega instinct to submit. You've denied yourself something fundamental to your nature, Dominic said, and there was something in his voice that suggested he understood the weight of that choice. That's why your body is reacting so intensely now. The suppressants wore off and everything came back at once, amplified by years of dormancy. They drove in silence for a while, and Sophia tried not to be hyper-aware of how close he was sitting to her, how every breath of his scent was making her body burn with need. When they finally pulled up to her apartment building, she felt a wave of relief. Somewhere private, somewhere she could think clearly, somewhere she could figure out how to navigate this impossible situation. They rode the elevator up to her apartment in tense silence. The moment the door closed behind them, the pretense of control evaporated entirely. Sophia leaned against the door, trying to regulate her breathing, trying to hold on to whatever fragments of her rational mind were still intact. Dominic stayed by the window, deliberately keeping his distance, his entire body radiating tension and restraint. Tell me what you need, he said quietly. Your heat is still escalating. There are a few options. One, I can call a medical team to come here and administer an emergency inhibitor that will slow your cycle, give you back some mental clarity. 2, I can help you through this the natural way, which means managing the physical symptoms without medication. Or 3, we can let the heat run its course and bond completely, which is what both our bodies want. But I understand that's probably not what you're ready for. He listed the options like he was discussing weather patterns, and Sophia felt something crack inside her. She walked to the window and looked out at the city below, trying to think through the fog of desperation. The inhibitor, she said finally. I have an appointment tomorrow afternoon, but if we could get one earlier. It won't work the way you want it to, he said gently. Not after you've been suppressed this long. Your body has been screaming for release for 9 years. A single inhibitor isn't going to quiet that. What it will do is buy you time, but the heat will come back stronger. Unless you're willing to go back on long-term suppressants, which I don't recommend. They're slowly destroying your system. You're going to have to address this eventually. She turned to look at him, and the way he was looking at her made her entire body go still. He was watching her like she was the most important thing in the world, like her needs and her choices and her autonomy mattered more to him than his own alpha nature, which was screaming at him to claim her. I don't want this, she whispered. I don't want to bond with an alpha. I don't want to lose my independence. I don't want my biology to control me. I know, he said quietly, and I'm not going to force you. But I also can't walk away, Sophia. The mate bond doesn't work that way. We're connected now whether you want to be or not. So what we need to figure out is what that means and how we move forward from here. They talked for hours. Dominic explained how the mate bond worked, how it would intensify as her heat progressed, how fighting it would only make the experience more painful and desperate. He explained that bonding didn't mean losing her independence or her career or her choices. It meant having a partner who was committed to her, who would support her, who would stand with her. As evening fell, Sophia learned more about the man behind the powerful alpha exterior. Dominic had lost his mate 15 years ago in a territorial dispute with another alpha pack. The loss had nearly destroyed him. He'd thrown himself into his business, expanding Blackwood Enterprises into a global powerhouse. He'd never expected to find another mate had resigned himself to a life alone. Until today. Until her. I never thought I'd feel this again, he admitted, sitting across from her on the couch, maintaining the distance she'd requested. When Victoria died, I thought that part of me died with her. I've spent 15 years believing I would never have a mate bond again. And then I walked into your office building and caught your scent, and everything changed. By the time night arrived, Sophia could barely think straight. Her body was burning, her skin hypersensitive to every breath, and the only thing she could think about was the alpha in her apartment, the mate her body was screaming for. I can't do this anymore, she said, her voice breaking. I can't keep fighting it. It hurts. Everything hurts. Dominic took a step toward her, his movements careful, deliberate. I know. I'm here. You're not alone. When he touched her, it was gentle, a simple brush of his fingertips against her cheek. But the contact sent electricity through her entire body, and she leaned into his palm, seeking more. Are you sure? He asked, his voice rough with restraint. I need to hear you say it, Sophia. I need to know this is what you want. Yes, she whispered. I want this. I want you. When he kissed her, it was desperate and hungry, and Sophia surrendered completely. She felt the mate bond snap into place like clicking into position, a connection so deep that she understood immediately why people risked everything for their mates. Later, much later, as they lay tangled together in her bed, Sophia listened to his heartbeat slowly returning to normal. She was drifting towards sleep when his voice broke through the comfortable silence. We need to talk, he said quietly, and her contentment began to crack. About what? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. About what happens now. About obligations and expectations and the reality of what bonding with an alpha king actually means. Sophia lifted her head to look at him, and she saw the conflict in his expression. He wanted her. That much was clear. But he also had a life responsibilities, a position that came with expectations. Tell me, she said simply. No matter what it is, tell me every mom. Dominic took a deep breath. The council is going to want to meet you. The nobility will demand a formal ceremony, and then there's the matter of heirs. He said it carefully, like he was bracing for an explosion. Heirs? Sophia felt her body go cold. What do you mean, succession? He said quietly. I'm the Alpha King. I need an heir. When we bond officially, you become the Omega Queen, and the council will expect you to produce an heir within the year. It's not a suggestion, Sophia. It's an obligation that comes with the title. It's non-negotiable. Sophia felt the words wash over her like ice water. An heir, within a year. She had just bonded with this man hours ago, had just experienced her first heat cycle in 9 years, was still getting used to the idea that she was no longer an independent architect, but rather an Omega mate with obligations and expectations spreading out before her like an impossible future. How long did you know about this before you told me? She asked, quietly, pulling the sheets around herself, suddenly hyper-aware of her vulnerability. From the moment I smelled you, he admitted. From the moment I realized you were my mate, I knew that bonding with you came with obligations. I knew that the council would expect an heir. You knew, her voice rose. You knew this entire time and you didn't tell me. I was hoping, he started, but she cut him off. You were hoping what? That I wouldn't care, that I'd just accept it because the bond makes me willing. She stood up from the bed, wrapping the sheet around herself like armor. This is exactly what I was afraid of. This is exactly why I didn't want to bond. The moment a mate bond forms, all my choices disappear. I become an object with a purpose instead of a person with autonomy. Dominic stood as well, and she could see the conflict radiate across his face. That's not how this works, Sophia. I'm trying to be honest with you. Yes, there are obligations. Yes, the council has expectations, but that doesn't erase who you are or what you want. Doesn't it? She challenged. I'm 28 years old and I've spent 9 years building a life where I could make my own decisions. And now I'm bonded to an alpha king and expected to produce an heir within a year. How is that not erasing who I am? He reached for her, but she stepped away. Don't touch me. I need to think. I need to process what you've just told me. Sophia. No, just no. I need space. I need to understand what this bond actually means and what I've agreed to by accepting it. Dominic was quiet for a long moment, and she could see how much it was costing him to respect her request for space. You're right, he said finally. You deserve time to process this. You deserve to understand the full scope of what bonding with me means before you make peace with it. He pulled on his clothes and stood by the window, deliberately keeping distance between them. I'm going to have a suite prepared for you at the estate, not because I'm forcing you, but because you're going to need protection once the other alphas in the city figure out that my mate is living in a small downtown apartment. And because you're going to want access to the resources and information you need to understand what comes next. The estate. Sophia felt her life spinning further out of her control. You're talking about me moving to your estate. I'm talking about giving you options, he said gently. You can stay here if you want. I won't stop you, but I also can't pretend that's safe anymore. The scent bond between us is going to broadcast to every alpha within miles that you're marked. They'll be drawn to it, drawn to you, looking for opportunities. At the estate, you will be protected. You'll have resources, advisors, people who can help you navigate this new life. She hated that it made sense. She hated that she could see the logic in what he was saying, even as every part of her rebelled against the loss of autonomy it represented. I don't want to live in an estate, Dominic. I want my apartment and my job and my normal life back. I know, he said quietly, and I wish I could give that to you. But that life is over now, Sophia. The moment our scents crossed, the moment the bond formed, everything changed. Sophia stood frozen as the weight of his words settled over her like a physical thing. Everything changed. That was what he'd said. Not everything might change. Not everything could change. Everything changed. And he was right. She could feel it in the mate bond thrumming between them, in the way her body still responded to his proximity, despite her anger and the way some fundamental part of her had shifted the moment their scents crossed. The old Sophia, the independent architect who'd spent 9 years building a life on her terms, was gone. She had been replaced by someone new, someone bound to an alpha king, someone with obligations she'd never asked for, and a future she couldn't escape. She turned away from Dominic, wrapping the sheet tighter around herself, and walked to the bedroom window. The city sprawled below them, glittering in the darkness, and she wondered if anyone down there was dealing with the kind of life-altering decision she was facing. Probably not. Most people didn't wake up in heat and stumble into bonding with the most powerful alpha in the Northeast by the end of the day. Most people didn't have their entire futures rewritten in the span of hours. "What do you need from me?" she asked quietly, not turning around. "Besides the air, obviously. What else does an alpha king need from his mate?" She could hear the bitterness in her own voice, and she didn't try to hide it. Dominic deserved to know that despite the bond singing between them, despite her body's willingness to comply with whatever he wanted, her mind was still fighting. "Everything," he said simply. "I need everything from you. Your honesty, your presence, your partnership. The heir is important, yes, but it's not the only thing. The council wants an heir because they need to know that the line of succession is secure. But what I want from you goes much deeper than that." She finally turned to look at him. He was standing in the moonlight streaming through her window, his expression a mixture of desire and concern. "How long?" she asked. "How long do I have before I have to produce this heir? The council will want a formal mating ceremony within 3 months. After that, they'll expect pregnancy within a year. That gives us time, Sophia. Time to figure this out together. Time for you to adjust to your new life. Time for us to build something real instead of just following biological imperative." 3 months. She had 3 months to learn how to be an Omega Queen, to navigate estate politics, to deal with the weight of expectation that came with bonding an Alpha King. 3 months to either accept her new reality or figure out how to fight it. The problem was that fighting it would mean fighting the mate bond itself, and she was increasingly unsure if she had the strength for that. The bond was already so strong, and it was only going to get stronger as they spent more time together. Already she could feel it pulling at her, urging her to trust him, to believe in him, to stop fighting and just surrender to what they were becoming together. "I need to go back," she said finally. "I need to go back to my apartment and get my things. I need to quit my job. I need to do the practical stuff before I can even think about moving to an estate." Dominic nodded slowly, like he understood that this was a necessary step, even if it wasn't the step he would have chosen. "Okay, we'll go tomorrow during daylight. We'll tell your colleagues that you're leaving. We'll collect your belongings, and then we'll go to the estate and start figuring out what your new life looks like." "And if I hate it?" Sophia challenged. "If I get to the estate and I hate everything about it, if I decide that bonding with you was a mistake." His expression didn't change, but she could feel something shift in the mate bond. A flash of fear quickly suppressed. "Then we deal with that together. But I don't think you will. I think you're terrified, and rightfully so. But I also think that once you adjust, once you understand the scope of what this bond could mean, you're going to find that being my mate isn't a prison. It's an opportunity." She wanted to argue, wanted to insist that he was wrong, that she would definitely hate it, that this entire situation was a disaster of epic proportions. But her body was already calming, her heat beginning to settle now that she was bonded and marked. Now that she had an alpha who was committed to her, the biological part of her, the omega that she'd spent 9 years suppressing, was satisfied in a way that her rational mind couldn't quite argue against. So instead of arguing, she just nodded and tried not to think about how much her life had changed in the span of a single day. Morning came too quickly. Sophia awoke to find herself wrapped around Dominic, having climbed into his arms sometime during the night, seeking comfort even in sleep. She pulled away quickly, embarrassed by the intimacy, but he simply pulled her back, his arm tightening around her waist. "Don't," he murmured, still half asleep. "Let me hold you. Let me have this." She considered arguing, considered insisting on distance, but the exhaustion of the previous day was too much. She surrendered and lay in his arms as morning light filtered through the windows. It was nice, she had to admit, feeling held, feeling protected, feeling like she mattered to someone. It was also terrifying because she knew that this comfort could become a trap. She could become so dependent on this feeling that she'd lose herself entirely. But for now, with the morning light soft and everything quiet, she let herself just exist in the moment without fighting it. They showered separately, Dominic apparently understanding that she needed space after the intensity of the night before. When they emerged, both dressed, the professional distance was back between them, though she could still feel the mate bond thrumming underneath like a current. Dominic's driver arrived promptly at 9 to take them to her office. The ride was silent. Sophia lost in thought about what she would tell her colleagues. What explanation could she possibly give for suddenly leaving the firm? She was an important member of their design team. The riverfront project she'd been working on was months from completion. Leaving now would create problems for everyone, but she also couldn't tell them the truth. Hey, I bonded with an alpha king yesterday, so now I'm moving to his estate, and becoming an omega queen wasn't exactly professional. When they arrived at Morgan and Reed Architecture, Dominic insisted on staying close, his alpha nature apparently on high alert in this new territory. She led him through the open plan office to her desk, acutely aware of the stares following them. Derek approached cautiously, his expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. Sophia, we missed you at the riverfront meeting yesterday. Everything okay? Before she could answer, Dominic stepped forward, extending his hand. Dominic Blackwood, I believe we had a brief introduction yesterday. Derek's eyes widened as he shook Dominic's hand. Yes, of course, Mr. Blackwood. It's an honor. Sophia and I have some news to share with the partners. Dominic continued smoothly. Would you mind arranging a quick meeting? 20 minutes later, Sophia found herself in the conference room with the firm's 3 founding partners and Dominic. She had expected the meeting to be difficult, had prepared herself for anger or disappointment. What she found instead was something entirely different. A mate bond with Dominic Blackwood. James Morgan, the senior partner, leaned back in his chair with an impressed expression. That's quite the development, Sophia. I understand this is sudden, Dominic said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to having his words accepted without question. But the situation requires immediate action. Sophia will need to resign her position effective immediately. Of course, Patricia Reed nodded. These things happen. We're sorry to lose you, Sophia, but we understand completely. Sophia stared at them, bewildered by their easy acceptance. The Riverfront Development Project will be reassigned, James assured her. Don't worry about that. Your new position is far more important. My new position? As Omega Queen, Patricia said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. It's quite an honor. The first Omega Queen in the Northeast in what, 15 years? 16, Dominic corrected. Since Victoria. The partners exchanged knowing looks, and Sophia felt a surge of frustration. Everyone was talking about her future as if it were already decided, as if she had no say in the matter. I appreciate your understanding, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. I'll clean out my desk and write up notes on all my current projects before I leave. An hour later, her career was officially over. 9 years of building a reputation in architecture gone in a morning meeting. She typed out her resignation letter, gathered the few personal items from her desk, and then she was done. The strange part was that she didn't feel the devastation she'd expected. Instead, she felt something closer to numbness, like her mind couldn't fully process the speed at which her life was changing. They returned to her apartment to pack her essential belongings. Dominic arranged for a moving company to handle the rest later. By early afternoon, they were on their way to the Blackwood estate, located 30 miles outside Boston, in the affluent suburb of Wellesley. As they drove through imposing iron gates and up a winding driveway lined with ancient oaks, Sophia got her first glimpse of her new home. The Blackwood estate was a sprawling Georgian mansion set on hundreds of acres of manicured grounds. The limestone facade gleamed in the afternoon sun, massive columns flanking the entrance, floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting the perfectly maintained gardens. This has been the Blackwood family home for 7 generations, Dominic said quietly as the car pulled up to the entrance. Since before the Revolutionary War. Sophia stared at the mansion, its grandeur making her apartment seem like a child's dollhouse in comparison. This wasn't just a home, it was a statement of power, of lineage, of history. You live here alone, she asked. Not alone, there's staff, of course. My mother still maintains apartments in the East Wing, and there are always PAC members coming and going. The Blackwood PAC has over 300 members scattered throughout New England, but this is our central gathering place. Staff appeared to take their bags as soon as the car stopped. Dominic helped Sophia from the car, his hand at the small of her back, a gesture that felt both protective and possessive. The entrance hall was breathtaking, with a sweeping marble staircase and a crystal chandelier that must have cost more than her annual salary. But it was the people that made Sophia's steps falter. Lined up in the entrance hall were at least 20 staff members, all standing at attention, all watching her, with expressions ranging from curiosity to wariness. May I present Sophia Morgan, Dominic announced formally, my mate and your future queen. You will treat her with the same respect you show me. Sophia felt a flush creep up her neck at being presented like some kind of royal acquisition. The staff bowed or curtsied, murmuring, "Welcome, Miss Morgan," in practiced unison. A distinguished-looking older woman stepped forward from the line. She was tall and elegant, with silver hair swept into an immaculate updo, and she carried herself with the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Eleanor Blackwood, she introduced herself, extending a hand adorned with a sapphire ring the size of a small pebble. Dominic's mother, welcome to our home. Sophia shook her hand, surprised by the strength in the older woman's grip. Thank you for having me, Mrs. Blackwood. Eleanor, please. The woman's smile was polite but reserved. We've been waiting a long time for Dominic to find a new mate. 16 years is too long for an alpha king to rule alone. There was something in Eleanor's gaze that made Sophia feel like she was being evaluated, measured against some standard she couldn't see. Mother, Dominic's voice carried a warning. Sophia has had an overwhelming 24 hours. Perhaps we could save the interrogation for later. Eleanor inclined her head slightly. Of course, Marcus will show you to your suite. I'm sure you'd like to rest before dinner. A man stepped forward from the line of staff, tall, lean, with intelligent eyes and an air of quiet competence. Miss Morgan, if you'll follow me. Dominic squeezed her hand reassuringly. I have some packed business to attend to. Marcus will take care of you, and I'll see you at dinner. 6:30 in the formal dining room. Before she could protest being left alone, he was gone, striding down a corridor, with Eleanor already deep in conversation. Marcus led her up the grand staircase and down a long hallway lined with oil paintings of stern-looking men who must have been Blackwood ancestors. The suite he showed her to was on the second floor, overlooking the formal gardens at the rear of the house. This is the Wisteria suite, Marcus explained as he opened the double doors. It's traditionally been used for the alpha's mate. The space beyond took her breath away. It was a full suite of rooms decorated in shades of cream and soft lavender, with windows that overlooked gardens blooming with the early spring flowers. The bedroom had an enormous four-poster bed draped in expensive fabrics. The sitting room had comfortable furniture arranged around a marble fireplace. There was a study with a desk and bookshelves, a bathroom with a soaking tub and separate shower, and a dressing room larger than her entire bedroom at home. It's beautiful, she said quietly, wandering through the rooms. Too beautiful. Like a gilded cage designed to keep her comfortable while she served her purpose as mate and mother to the heir. Mr. Blackwood had the suite redecorated when he learned about you, Marcus said, and there was something in his tone that caught her attention. Not disapproval exactly, but caution. You've worked for the Blackwoods a long time, she asked. All my life, Marcus confirmed. My family has served the Blackwood Alphas for generations. I was appointed as Dominic's personal assistant when he became Alpha King 16 years ago. After Victoria died. Marcus's expression flickered. Yes, after the tragedy. What was she like? Sophia couldn't help asking. Victoria. Marcus was quiet for a moment, as if considering how much to say. She was formidable, a true alpha female, which is rare. She and Dominic were matched from childhood, a political alliance between the Blackwood and Monroe packs. Not a mate bond? No. Arranged matches were common in those days, especially for alpha royalty. The mate bond is rare. That's why your arrival has caused such a stir. Sophia absorbed this information, trying to understand the world she'd suddenly been thrust into. And the current relationship between the Blackwoods and Monroes? Marcus's expression turned guarded, tense. Victoria's younger sister Annabelle is now the alpha of the Monroe pack. She blames Dominic for Victoria's death, though the attack was carried out by rogues. Before she could ask more questions, Marcus checked his watch. I should leave you to rest. A maid will come at 5:30 to help you prepare for dinner. I don't need help dressing, Sophia said quickly. Nevertheless, she will come. There are certain protocols for formal dinners at the estate. His tone made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. Is there anything else you need at the moment? Just some time to process everything. Of course. These rooms are your private domain. No one will enter without your permission. He moved to the door, then paused. One piece of advice, if I may. Sophia nodded. The Blackwood pack has its traditions going back centuries. Change comes slowly here, if at all. It would be wise to learn the rules before attempting to break them. With that cryptic warning, he departed, leaving Sophia alone in her luxurious new prison. She spent the next hour exploring her suite, finding that someone had already unpacked her belongings and arranged them in the massive closet. Her simple clothes looked out of place among the designer outfits that had apparently been purchased for her tag still attached. Someone had guessed her size perfectly, which was unsettling. At precisely 5:30, there was a knock at the door. The maid Sophia assumed come to help her prepare for dinner. But when she opened the door, she found Eleanor Blackwood instead. "May I come in?" the older woman asked, though she was already stepping past Sophia into the sitting room. "I thought we should have a chat before dinner." Sophia closed the door, bracing herself for whatever was coming. "Of course." Eleanor settled onto one of the armchairs, back straight, hands folded in her lap. She was wearing an elegant navy dress with a single strand of pearls, looking every inch the aristocratic matriarch. "I'm sure this has all been quite overwhelming for you," Eleanor began. "Finding yourself suddenly mated to an alpha king, brought to an estate like this, expected to adapt to a new life overnight." "It's been a lot to process," Sophia agreed cautiously. "I imagine so, particularly for someone who has been suppressing her omega nature for so long." Eleanor's tone made it clear what she thought of suppressants. "But fate has its ways, doesn't it? The mate bond cannot be denied forever." Sophia sat in the chair across from Eleanor, feeling at a distinct disadvantage. "Did you have a mate bond with Dominic's father?" "No," Eleanor said simply. "Edward and I had an arranged marriage, as was common for our generation. We grew fond of each other over time, but we never experienced what you and Dominic have. A true mate bond is rare and precious." "Then how can you understand what I'm going through?" "I've been the Omega Queen for 40 years, my dear. I understand exactly what you're facing. The loss of your old identity, the weight of expectation, the fear of failing at a role you never asked for." Sophia hadn't expected such forthright acknowledgement. "Did you ever regret it, becoming the Omega Queen?" "Regret is a luxury for those with choices," Eleanor replied. "I was born into pack royalty. My path was determined before I was old enough to walk. But I found purpose in my role and eventually contentment. And you expect me to do the same? What I expect is irrelevant. What matters is what the pack expects, what the council expects, what Dominic expects." Eleanor leaned forward slightly. "You have 3 months until the formal mating ceremony. 3 months to learn what it means to be an Omega Queen. I suggest you use that time wisely. And if I decide this isn't the life I want—" Eleanor's expression didn't change, but her voice cooled noticeably. "The mate bond has formed. Dominic has claimed you. There is no going back to your old life, Sophia. The sooner you accept that reality, the easier this transition will be." Before Sophia could respond, there was another knock at the door. This time it was the maid come to help her prepare for dinner. "I'll leave you to get ready," Eleanor said, rising gracefully. "We can continue our conversation another time." After Eleanor left, the maid, a young beta named Claire, helped Sophia select an appropriate outfit for dinner. The process was more complicated than Sophia expected, with specific protocols about what colors were appropriate for which occasions and which jewelry signified what status. By the time she descended to the formal dining room at 6:30, dressed in a simple but elegant navy dress that Claire assured her was appropriate for a family dinner, Sophia felt like an actress about to perform in a play without having learned her lines. The dining room was intimidating, with a table that could seat 20 crystal chandeliers and more silverware at each place setting than Sophia had ever used in her life. Dominic was already there, talking quietly with a man Sophia didn't recognize. They both turned as she entered, and Dominic's expression softened visibly. "Sophia," he crossed to her, taking her hand and bringing it briefly to his lips. "You look beautiful." The simple gesture sent warmth through her, a reaction that annoyed her even as she appreciated the compliment. "Thank you. Your mother helped me navigate the complexities of appropriate dinner attire." "I see." His tone suggested he understood exactly what kind of help his mother had provided. "Let me introduce you to Richard Langley, my beta and head of security for the pack." The man stepped forward, offering a polite bow. He was in his mid-40s with salt and pepper hair and the muscular build of someone who kept himself combat-ready. "Miss Morgan, it's an honor to meet Dominic's mate." Something in his tone set off warning bells in Sophia's mind. The words were correct, but there was an undercurrent that felt off. "Thank you, Mr. Langley. I understand you've worked with Dominic for some time." 20 years, Richard confirmed, "through good times and bad." "Richard was with me the night Victoria died." Dominic said quietly. He saved my life. An uncomfortable silence fell broken by the arrival of Eleanor. Dinner proceeded with the formal precision of a military operation. Servants appeared and disappeared silently. Courses were served and cleared with barely a word, and conversation flowed in carefully measured exchanges about pack business, local politics, and estate matters. Sophia said little, observing the dynamics between Dominic, Eleanor, and Richard. It was clear that Dominic was in charge, his authority absolute, but Eleanor wielded significant influence, particularly in matters concerning the estate and social obligations. Richard deferred to Dominic in all things, but there was something in his manner that suggested resentment beneath the respect. After dinner, Eleanor excused herself, citing a charity committee meeting in town. Richard departed shortly after, leaving Sophia alone with Dominic for the first time since they'd arrived at the estate. "Come," he said, offering his hand. "Let me show you something." He led her through the house to a part she hadn't seen yet, eventually stopping at a set of double doors made of dark wood carved with an intricate pattern of wolves and forests. "This is the heart room," he said, pushing the doors open. "It's the center of pack life at the estate." The room beyond was unlike anything else in the mansion. Where the rest of the house was formal and ornate, this room was warm and welcoming, with comfortable furniture ranged in conversational groups, a massive stone fireplace dominating one wall, and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves on another. The overall effect was more like a high-end lodge than a formal estate room. "This is where pack members gather for important discussions," Dominic explained. "Where we celebrate births, mourn deaths, mark transitions. It's the spiritual center of the Blackwood pack." Sophia wandered the room, taking in details. Photographs of pack members through the years, ceremonial objects displayed on shelves, a wall of portraits she assumed were previous Alpha Kings. "Your mother said I have 3 months until the formal mating ceremony," she said, not looking at him. "What exactly does that entail?" Dominic sighed, coming to stand beside her in front of the portraits. "It's a public acknowledgement of our bond, performed in front of the entire pack and representatives from other packs. It cements your position as Omega Queen. And after that, I'm expected to produce an heir within the year." "The council expects it, yes." "And what do you expect, Dominic?" She turned to face him directly. "Am I just a breeding vessel to you? A convenient womb to continue the Blackwood line?" Pain flashed across his face. "No, never that. You're my mate, Sophia. My partner, my equal." "Equal," she laughed bitterly. "What about this situation is equal? You've maintained your life, your position, your power. I've lost everything. My job, my home, my independence. All to become what, a glorified broodmare for the Blackwood pack. Is that what my mother told you?" "She told me to accept my reality, that there was no going back to my old life." Dominic was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "My mother comes from a different generation. Her understanding of the mate bond, of the Omega Queen's role, is traditional, rigid, but it doesn't have to be that way." "What does that mean?" "It means that while there are expectations, there are also possibilities." He moved closer, not touching her, but near enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "The mate bond connects us, yes, but it doesn't erase who you are. Your skills, your intelligence, your perspective, those are valuable to the pack, to me. As what an architect, am I going to design pack buildings between producing heirs, if that's what you want?" His answer surprised her. "The Blackwood pack has extensive real estate holdings throughout New England. We're constantly building, renovating, developing. Your expertise would be an asset." She studied his face, looking for deception, but found only sincerity. "You would let me continue working as an architect, not let Sophia encourage. Your happiness matters to me. Your fulfillment matters. The mate bond is about partnership, not ownership." She wanted to believe him. Part of her, the Omega part that had responded so powerfully to the mate bond, desperately wanted to trust in what he was offering. But the independent woman who had spent 9 years suppressing that Omega nature was still wary, still skeptical. "And the heir, is that negotiable too?" His expression grew more serious. "The continuation of the Alpha line is essential for pack stability. Without a clear successor, there would be challenges to leadership, possibly violence. The council insists on an heir within a year because They remember what happened after Victoria died without producing a child. The pack nearly tore itself apart. So that's a no. That's a biological reality. But the timing, how we approach it, those things can be discussed. Sophia turned away, moving to the window that overlooked the estate grounds. Twilight was falling, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns and formal gardens. In the distance, she could see the edge of dense woods. Pack territory, she assumed. I feel trapped, Dominic. Like I'm caught in a current that's pulling me away from everything I've ever known, and I can't swim back to shore. He came to stand beside her, careful not to crowd her space. I understand that feeling. When I became Alpha King after my father died, I felt the same way. Overwhelmed, unprepared, caught in traditions and expectations I hadn't chosen. How did you handle it? Day by day, step by step, I learned the rules, then figured out which ones could be bent or changed. I found allies. I made the role my own. He turned to face her. You can do the same, Sophia. You're stronger than you know. She looked at him, this man who had completely upended her life in less than 24 hours. He was offering her a path forward, a way to reconcile her old identity with her new reality. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what she would have chosen. But perhaps it was a starting point. I'll need time, she said finally. Time to adjust, time to learn, time to decide if I can be what everyone expects me to be. You have time, he assured her. 3 months until the formal ceremony. Use it however you need to. Ask questions, explore the estate, meet pack members, learn our ways. And if there are aspects of pack life you want to change, tell me. I can't promise everything will be possible, but I can promise to listen. It was a reasonable offer, more reasonable than she had expected. Still doubt lingered. And if at the end of 3 months I decide I can't do this, if I want to leave, Dominic's expression tightened, a flash of pain crossing his features before he controlled it. The mate bond makes that difficult for both of us. Being separated from your mate causes physical and emotional distress. But if that's truly what you want, I won't force you to stay. The admission clearly cost him. Sophia could feel the tension in the mate bond, the resistance to even considering separation. I'm not saying that's what I want, she clarified. I'm just trying to understand my options. Your options are to reject everything the bond offers and suffer the consequences, or to embrace the connection and see where it leads. His voice softened. I'm asking you to give us a chance, Sophia. Give the bond a chance. She considered his words, weighing them against her fears, her resistance, her desperate desire to maintain control of her own life. Finally, she nodded. 3 months. I'll use that time to learn to adapt, to see if there's a place for me in this world that doesn't require sacrificing everything I am. Relief washed over his face. That's all I ask. Later that night, alone in her new suite, Sophia stood at the window watching moonlight silver the formal gardens. Her first day as mate to the Alpha King had been a whirlwind of revelations, adjustments, and negotiations. She felt drained emotionally and physically, and yet beneath the exhaustion and uncertainty, there was a flicker of something else, a sense of possibility. Dominic had surprised her with his willingness to consider her needs, to offer compromises. Perhaps there was a path forward that allowed her to maintain some semblance of her identity while embracing this new role. Or perhaps that was just wishful thinking, a temporary reprieve before the full weight of tradition and expectation crushed her independent spirit. Time would tell. 3 months to decide her fate. 3 months to become an Omega Queen or reject the mate bond entirely. As she turned from the window, a soft knock sounded at her door. When she opened it, she found a young woman standing there, perhaps 20 years old, with a hesitant smile. Miss Morgan, I'm Rebecca Stone. I work in the estate library. I just wanted to introduce myself and offer my help. I'm an Omega too, and I thought you might have questions that are easier to ask someone like us. Sophia studied the young woman, surprised by the offer. Thank you, Rebecca. I do have questions, many of them. I'm available whenever you need me. The library is on the ground floor, East Wing. She paused, then added in a lower voice, I was on suppressants too until last year. I know how overwhelming the transition can be. With that, she gave a respectful nod and departed, leaving Sophia with the first genuine sense of hope she'd felt since arriving at the estate. Perhaps she wasn't as alone here as she'd thought. The weeks that followed Sophia's arrival at the Blackwood estate settled into an unexpected rhythm. Each morning she woke in her luxurious suite, had breakfast on her private terrace, and then spent her days learning about the complex world she'd been thrust into. Rebecca Stone proved to be an invaluable ally. The young librarian had created a comprehensive education program for Sophia, covering everything from Blackwood family history to pack hierarchy to the political alliances that defined werewolf society in New England. They spent hours in the vast estate library surrounded by ancient texts and modern databases, piecing together the intricate tapestry of Sophia's new reality. The Blackwood Pack is one of the oldest in North America, Rebecca explained one morning, spreading a genealogical chart across the library table. They arrived in Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1634, fleeing persecution in England. Sophia traced the family lines with her finger, following the succession of Alpha Kings down to Dominic. And they've maintained control of the Northeast all this time. Not without challenges. There have been territorial wars, succession disputes, attempted coups. The Monroe Pact to the west has been their primary rival for over 2 centuries. Victoria's family. Rebecca's expression tightened. Yes, the marriage between Dominic and Victoria was supposed to end the conflict, unite the territories. Until she died. Until she was killed, Rebecca corrected quietly. By rogues officially, though there are rumors. Sophia looked up sharply. What kind of rumors? Rebecca glanced around, though they were alone in the library. Some say it wasn't rogues, that Victoria was planning to challenge Dominic for full control of both territories. That her death was convenient. You think Dominic had his own wife killed? No, Rebecca looked horrified. I'm just telling you what some people whisper. I don't believe it for a second. Dominic was devastated by her death. He nearly died trying to save her. Sophia absorbed this information, adding it to her growing understanding of the political landscape. And Victoria's sister blames Dominic anyway. Annabelle Monroe has never accepted the official explanation. She's been building her power base for years. Some say she's preparing for war. These conversations with Rebecca helped Sophia navigate the complex social dynamics of the estate. She learned to identify pack members by their scent signatures, to understand the subtle hierarchies that governed interactions, to recognize the signs of submission and dominance that werewolves displayed instinctively. Dominic gave her space during these first weeks, seeming to understand her need to acclimate at her own pace. They shared dinner most evenings, often joined by Eleanor or Richard or other high-ranking pack members. During these formal meals, Sophia observed the power dynamics at play, noting who deferred to whom, who spoke freely, who remained silent. Richard Langley, she noticed, watched her constantly with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. When Dominic was present, Richard maintained a respectful distance, but Sophia occasionally caught him studying her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. What's Richard's story? She asked Rebecca one afternoon as they walked through the formal gardens. Rebecca's steps faltered slightly. Richard, he's been with the pack forever, Dominic's right hand. That's not what I asked. Rebecca sighed, glancing around to ensure they were alone. Richard was in love with Victoria. Everyone knew it, except maybe Dominic. When she died, something in Richard broke. He's devoted to Dominic, would die for him without hesitation, but there's always been this undercurrent. And now I've appeared. And now you're here, Rebecca confirmed. Dominic's true mate, something Victoria never was. I imagine that's difficult for Richard to accept. These revelations made Sophia more cautious around the beta, though he remained unfailingly polite in their interactions. There was something in his eyes, though, a calculation that set her on edge. As her first month at the estate progressed, Sophia began to venture beyond the main house, exploring the extensive grounds with Rebecca as her guide. They visited the pack training fields where young werewolves learned to control their shifts, the communal areas where pack members gathered for celebrations, the sacred grove where important ceremonies were conducted. The formal mating ceremony will take place here, Rebecca explained, as they stood in the ancient clearing surrounded by towering oaks. Under the full moon, with the entire pack as witness. Sophia tried to envision it, standing before hundreds of werewolves, publicly binding herself to Dominic, accepting the role of Omega Queen. The thought still filled her with trepidation, but the sharp panic she'd initially felt had dulled to a more manageable anxiety. What does the ceremony involve? She asked. An exchange of vows, the presentation of the alpha's mark, the council's blessing. It's beautiful, really, a celebration of the bond. And after that, I'm expected to produce an heir. Rebecca hesitated. That's the tradition, yes. But traditions can evolve. You already have a true mate bond that's rarer and more powerful than any ceremony. During these weeks, Sophia's relationship with Dominic evolved as well. The initial shock and resistance had given way to a cautious exploration. They spent evenings in his study or the heart room talking about their pasts, their beliefs, their hopes. She learned about his childhood as the alpha heir, the weight of expectation he'd carried, the loss of his father at a young age. He listened to her stories of growing up as an omega, the discrimination she'd faced, her decision to use suppressants to forge her own path. Slowly, tentatively, they were building something between them, not just the biological mate bond, but a foundation of understanding and respect. One evening, about a month after her arrival, Dominic took her to a part of the estate she hadn't yet explored. They drove in his Range Rover, past the manicured gardens and formal grounds, into the wilder territory beyond. "Where are we going?" Sophia asked as they followed a narrow dirt road through dense forest. "Somewhere special. Somewhere I haven't shown anyone in years." They eventually reached a small clearing where a cabin stood, rustic but well-maintained. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, suggesting someone had prepared for their arrival. "This was my grandfather's hunting cabin," Dominic explained as he helped her from the car. "I come here when I need to think, to escape the weight of being Alpha King for a while." Inside the cabin was unexpectedly cozy, a single large room with a stone fireplace, comfortable furniture, and large windows overlooking a small lake. A fire crackled in the hearth, and a simple meal had been laid out on the wooden table. "No staff, no council members, no pack politics," Dominic said, taking off his jacket. "Just us." Sophia felt something shift between them in this intimate setting, away from the formality of the main house. Here Dominic seemed more relaxed, the mantle of Alpha King temporarily set aside. They ate by firelight, talking easily about inconsequential things, books they'd read, places they'd traveled, foods they enjoyed. For the first time, it felt like a normal date between two people getting to know each other, not the carefully orchestrated interactions of an Alpha King and his reluctant mate. After dinner, they sat before the fire, glasses of wine in hand, the conversation flowing naturally. "Why architecture?" Dominic asked. "What drew you to it?" Sophia considered the question. "I've always been fascinated by spaces, how they're designed, how they make people feel, how they shape interactions. Architecture is this perfect blend of art and science, creativity and precision. When I design a building, I'm creating something that will outlast me, something that becomes part of the world's fabric." "You're still passionate about it." "I am," she admitted. "It's been strange not working these past weeks. I miss it." Dominic was quiet for a moment, swirling the wine in his glass. "There's a property in Cambridge the pack acquired recently. Historic building needs complete renovation. I've been looking for an architect to oversee the project." Sophia looked at him sharply. "Are you offering me a..." "I'm offering you an opportunity to keep doing what you love, if you're interested." The gesture touched her deeply, not just the opportunity itself, but the recognition of her need to maintain her identity beyond being his mate. "I'd like that," she said quietly. "Thank you." Later, as they stood on the cabin's porch overlooking the moonlit lake, Dominic moved behind her, tentatively wrapping his arms around her waist. It was the first time he'd initiated physical contact outside the requirements of the mate bond since their night together in her apartment. Sophia tensed briefly, then relaxed against him, allowing herself to feel the comfort of his embrace, the rightness of it. The mate bond hummed between them, but there was something else too. A genuine connection that had nothing to do with biology and everything to do with the people they were. "I've missed touching you," Dominic murmured against her hair, "but I wanted to give you space-time to adjust." Sophia turned in his arms, looking up at him in the silvery moonlight. "I appreciate that. I needed the time. I'm still adjusting, still figuring out what all this means for me, for my future. But I'm starting to see that maybe it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Maybe there's a way to be your mate and still be myself." His expression softened, hope kindling in his eyes. "That's all I want, Sophia, for you to be happy here with me." When he kissed her, it was gentle questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Instead, she leaned into him, allowing herself to acknowledge the desire that had been simmering beneath the surface since their bonding. They made love, slowly, tenderly, in the simple cabin bed, rediscovering each other without the desperate intensity of the heat. Afterward, lying in his arms, Sophia felt a peace she hadn't expected to find, a sense that perhaps this new life wasn't a prison after all, but simply a different path than the one she'd planned. They returned to the main house the next morning, both aware that something had shifted between them, a corner turned in their relationship. As they drove through the estate gates, however, Sophia sensed immediately that something was wrong. Pack members moved with unusual urgency, and Richard Langley was waiting for them at the entrance, his expression grim. "There's been an incident," Richard said as soon as they stepped from the car. "The Monroe Pack has violated the border treaty. 3 of our young betas were attacked during a training run. 2 injured, 1 missing." Dominic's demeanor transformed instantly from the relaxed man of the previous evening to the formidable Alpha King. Wow, early this morning, we've tracked the scents to the river boundary, but they crossed into Monroe territory. Organize a search party. Senior Beta's only fully armed. I'll lead it myself." Richard nodded sharply. "Already assembled and waiting for you." Dominic turned to Sophia, conflict evident in his expression. "I have to go. This could escalate quickly." "I understand," she said, though anxiety churned in her stomach. "Be careful." He touched her cheek briefly. "Stay in the main house. Richard will ensure your safety until I return." Within minutes, Dominic had departed with a team of 10 betas, leaving Sophia standing in the entrance hall with Richard. "Let me escort you inside, Miss Morgan," Richard said, his tone professional but cold. "The situation is volatile." Throughout the day, tension gripped the estate. Pack members moved with wary alertness. Security patrols were doubled, and Eleanor canceled all off-property engagements. Sophia remained in her suite, unsettled by the sudden reminder of the dangers inherent in werewolf politics. Rebecca visited briefly, bringing updates. "The missing beta was found alive but badly injured," she reported. "They're bringing him back now. Dominic is meeting with representatives from the Monroe Pack to discuss the violation." "Is war possible?" Sophia asked. Rebecca's expression was grave. "It's always possible between Blackwood and Monroe. The peace has been fragile since Victoria's death." By evening, Dominic had still not returned, and Sophia found herself pacing her suite, anxiety mounting. The mate bond felt stretched thin, a constant awareness of distance and danger that made it difficult to concentrate. A soft knock at her door revealed Eleanor, her usual composure slightly frayed. "May I come in?" the older woman asked. "I thought you might appreciate company while we wait." Sophia gestured her inside, surprised by the overture. Eleanor had maintained a polite distance since their initial conversation, observing Sophia's integration into pack life, but rarely engaging directly. "Any news?" Sophia asked as they settled in the sitting area. "Nothing new. These negotiations can take time. Dominic will be careful not to escalate the situation unnecessarily." Eleanor studied her for a moment. "You're worried about him." It wasn't a question, but Sophia answered anyway. "Yes, I didn't expect to feel so connected, to sense his absence so acutely." "The mate bond grows stronger with time," Eleanor said, "especially during times of stress or danger. Your omega instincts recognize the threat to your alpha. It's disorienting. A month ago, I barely knew he existed. Now I can feel him miles away, sense his emotions, his physical state." Eleanor's expression softened slightly. "You're adjusting remarkably well considering the circumstances. Many Omegas in your position would have broken under the pressure." Coming from Eleanor, this was high praise indeed. "I'm still finding my footing. Everything is so different from the life I had before." "Different doesn't necessarily mean worse," Eleanor observed. "Just as maintaining certain aspects of your former life doesn't mean rejecting your new one. Dominic told me about the Cambridge project, that he's offered you the opportunity to work as an architect again. Does that bother you? A generation ago, it would have been unthinkable for the Omega Queen to have a professional life outside her duties to the pack. But times change, and Dominic has always been progressive in his thinking." Eleanor smoothed her skirt, a gesture Sophia had come to recognize as a sign she was choosing her words carefully. "What matters is the stability of the pack, the continuation of the bloodline. If allowing you this freedom strengthens your bond with Dominic, then I support it." It was a pragmatic acceptance rather than enthusiastic endorsement, But from Eleanor, it was significant nonetheless. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Marcus, his expression urgent. Mrs. Blackwood, Miss Morgan, the Alpha is returning. There's been a development. They hurried downstairs to find the entrance hall filled with tense pack members. The doors burst open and Dominic strode in, flanked by his betas. His expression was thunderous, his movements sharp with barely contained rage. Behind him came Richard, supporting a young woman Sophia didn't recognize. She was beautiful despite her obvious exhaustion, with dark hair and striking features that seemed vaguely familiar. "What's happening?" Sophia whispered to Rebecca, who had appeared at her side. Rebecca's response was hushed, shocked. "That's Annabelle Monroe, Victoria's sister, the Alpha of the Monroe pack." Sophia felt a chill run through her. The presence of the Monroe Alpha in Blackwood territory, especially after an attack, was unprecedented. "My office," Dominic commanded, and the group moved quickly to comply, disappearing down a corridor. Eleanor turned to the assembled pack members. "Return to your duties. The Alpha will address everyone when he's ready." As the hall cleared, Eleanor took Sophia's arm. "Come, we should be present for this." They followed the group to Dominic's office, a wood-paneled room dominated by a massive desk. Dominic stood behind it, Richard and the senior betas flanking him, while Annabelle Monroe sat in a chair before the desk. She looked exhausted but defiant, her chin lifted despite her vulnerable position. Dominic acknowledged Sophia and Eleanor with a nod as they entered, then returned his attention to Annabelle. "Tell them what you told me," he instructed, his voice tight with controlled fury. Annabelle straightened in her chair. "My pack didn't attack your betas. We found them injured on our territory and were treating them when your search party arrived." "If not your pack, then who?" Eleanor demanded. "Richard Langley," Annabelle said simply. "He's been working with Victor Reed to destabilize both our territories." The accusation hung in the air like a thunderclap. Richard, standing beside Dominic, went completely still. "That's absurd," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I've served the Blackwood pack my entire life." "You loved my sister," Annabelle countered, "and when she died, you blamed Dominic for failing to protect her. You've been planning revenge for 16 years. Sophia watched the interaction carefully, noting the subtle changes in Richard's posture, the flicker of something in his eyes before he controlled it. "These are desperate lies," Richard insisted. "She's trying to divide us, to weaken the pack from within." "Then explain this." Annabelle reached into her pocket and withdrew a small object, placing it on the desk. It was a flash drive. Communications between Richard and Victor Reed dating back 3 years. Plans to incite war between Blackwood and Monroe, weakening both packs so Reed could take over the combined territories. Dominic picked up the drive, his expression unreadable. "And you expect me to believe you discovered this through legitimate means?" "We captured one of Reed's lieutenants last week. He had this in his possession. I was coming to warn you when your betas were attacked, another attempt to push us into war." The tension in the room was palpable. Dominic turned to Richard, their gazes locking in a silent confrontation. "If this is true," Dominic said softly, "you betrayed not just me, but everything my family has built for generations." "It's not true," Richard insisted, though Sophia noticed a bead of sweat forming on his brow. "She's manipulating you just like her sister tried to do." Something dangerous flashed in Dominic's eyes. "Be very careful, Richard." The confrontation might have escalated further, but at that moment, Sophia felt a sudden sharp pain low in her abdomen. She gasped, doubling over, drawing everyone's attention. "Sophia." Dominic was at her side instantly, his anger giving way to concern. Another wave of pain hit, and with it came a realization that stunned her. She looked up at Dominic, her voice barely a whisper. "I think I'm pregnant." The room went completely silent. Dominic stared at her, shock replacing every other emotion on his face. "That's not possible," Richard said, breaking the silence. "It's only been a month." "The mate bond accelerates everything," Eleanor said quietly, "especially the first conception." Sophia barely heard them, focused entirely on the sensation inside her body, the unmistakable presence of new life connected to her through the mate bond in a way she couldn't have imagined possible. Dominic placed a gentle hand on her abdomen, and his expression transformed with wonder. "I can sense it," he murmured. "Our child." The moment of revelation was shattered by sudden movement. Richard, seeing everyone distracted, made a desperate lunge for the door. He was intercepted by 2 betas who tackled him to the floor. Take him to the holding cells. Dominic ordered, his attention still primarily on Sophia. Postguards. I'll deal with him later. As Richard was dragged away, shouting protests and threats, Dominic guided Sophia to a chair. Are you in pain? Do you need a doctor? I'm okay, she assured him, though she was reeling from the revelation. It was just a sudden awareness, a connection through the bond. Annabelle Monroe watched the scene with an unreadable expression. Congratulations, she said finally. A true mate bond child is a powerful omen. Dominic turned to her, his posture still wary, but less overtly hostile. We'll need to verify your information about Richard and Reed. If it's accurate, we have a common enemy. One who has been playing us against each other for years. Annabelle agreed. Perhaps it's time to revisit the alliance our families once attempted. The political implications of the moment weren't lost on Sophia despite her personal shock. This pregnancy, coming so unexpectedly, had arrived at a pivotal moment in pack relations. It was both a personal milestone and a political statement, the unequivocal establishment of a new Blackwood lineage. In the days that followed, the estate was a flurry of activity. Richard Langley was formally charged with treason after the evidence on the flash drive was verified. Victor Reed went into hiding when his plot was exposed, but both the Blackwood and Monroe packs dispatched teams to track him down. Sophia, meanwhile, underwent a comprehensive medical examination that confirmed what the mate bond had already told her: she was indeed pregnant. The accelerated conception, a rare but documented phenomenon in true mate bonds. Everything looks perfect, Dr. Chen, the pack physician, assured her after the examination. The pregnancy is progressing normally, just on an accelerated timeline. You're already about 6 weeks along, developmentally speaking, though it's only been a month since conception. Is that safe? Sophia asked, still trying to process the reality of carrying a child she hadn't planned for, at least not so soon. Mate bond pregnancies are generally very healthy, the doctor explained. The bond itself provides additional support and protection for both mother and child. You'll need to be monitored more frequently than a typical pregnancy, but there's every reason to expect a positive outcome. Dominic was ecstatic, though he tried to temper his enthusiasm out of respect for Sophia's more complicated feelings. He attended every medical appointment, asked endless questions, and began making plans for a nursery adjacent to Sophia's suite. We don't have to use it right away, he assured her when she expressed concern about the baby being separated from her. It's traditional for the heir to have their own space from birth, but we can keep the baby with us as long as you prefer. This consideration, this willingness to adapt traditions to accommodate her needs, touched Sophia deeply. It reinforced what she had begun to believe during their night at the cabin, that a life with Dominic didn't have to mean the complete surrender of her identity and autonomy. One evening, about a week after the pregnancy revelation, Sophia found Dominic in his study reviewing security reports. The hunt for Victor Reed was ongoing, and tensions remained high despite the new alliance with the Monroe pack. May I interrupt? She asked from the doorway. He looked up immediately, setting aside his work. Always. Come in. Sophia crossed to his desk, perching on the edge. I've been thinking about the formal mating ceremony. It's still 2 months away. We can postpone it if you'd prefer, given the pregnancy. She shook her head. Actually, I'd like to move it forward. Have it as soon as possible. Surprise flickered across his face. Really, what changed your mind? Sophia placed a hand on her still flat abdomen. This child changed everything. Not just the reality of being pregnant, but what it represents. A new beginning, a true joining of our lives. She met his gaze steadily. I'm not saying all my doubts and fears have vanished. I still worry about losing myself in this role, but I'm starting to see that maybe I don't have to. Maybe being the Omega Queen can be something I define on my own terms with your support. Dominic stood, moving around the desk to take her hands in his. You have my support. Always. Whatever vision you have for your role in the pack, I want to help you achieve it. Then let's make it official. Let's have the ceremony affirm our bond in front of the pack and start building the future together, not as alpha king and reluctant mate, but as true partners. The joy that bloomed in his expression was worth any lingering reservations she might have had. When he kissed her, Sophia felt the mate bond singing between them stronger and clearer than ever before. The formal mating ceremony took place 2 weeks later, under the full moon in the sacred grove. The entire Blackwood pack gathered to witness, along with representatives from allied packs, including Annabelle Monroe in her senior betas, a powerful symbol of the new alliance. Sophia wore a simple white gown that Eleanor had commissioned, elegant but comfortable to accommodate her changing body. As she walked through the assembled pack members toward Dominic, who waited beneath the ancient oak at the center of the grove, she felt a surprising sense of rightness, of belonging. This wasn't the future she had planned for herself. It wasn't the life she had spent 9 years building. But standing before Dominic, speaking the ancient vows that bound them officially as mates, Sophia realized that perhaps fate had known better than she had what she truly needed. Not just independence, which she had clung to so desperately, but connection. Not just professional success, but personal fulfillment. Not just freedom from biological imperatives, but the joy that came from embracing them on her own terms. When Dominic placed his mark, a ceremonial pendant bearing the Blackwood crest around her neck, the pack erupted in cheers and howls of celebration. Sophia was officially the Omega Queen, bound to the Alpha King, not just by biology, but by choice. The celebration continued late into the night with feasting and dancing and the traditional runs through the forest in wolf form. Sophia, unable to shift due to her pregnancy, watched from the terrace as Dominic led the pack in their joyful expressions of freedom and unity. Eleanor joined her, offering a glass of sparkling water. "You've made him happier than I've seen him in 16 years, the older woman observed. "The pack senses it too. His strength, his confidence, they've been renewed by your bond." "I'm still learning what it means to be part of all this," Sophia admitted. "But I'm starting to understand the beauty in it, the sense of connection and belonging." "That's the gift of the pack," Eleanor said. "No matter how independent we might be as individuals, we're stronger together." "You'll find your place, Sophia. You already have more than you realize." As the months passed, Sophia's pregnancy progressed rapidly, the mate bond accelerating the normal timeline. By the time the 3-month mark arrived, what would have been the original date for the mating ceremony, she was already showing significantly, her body changing to accommodate the new life within. True to his word, Dominic supported her continued professional involvement, arranging for the Cambridge property renovation to begin under her direction. Sophia found a surprising joy in balancing her architectural work with her new responsibilities as Omega Queen, discovering that the two roles complemented rather than conflicted with each other. The hunt for Victor Reed continued, though he remained elusive, reportedly having fled to Europe to escape the combined forces of the Blackwood and Monroe packs. The alliance between the two territories strengthened with regular diplomatic exchanges and joint council meetings. Richard Langley, after a formal trial before the Pack Council, was sentenced to permanent exile, a punishment considered worse than death in werewolf society, as it severed all pack bonds and left him essentially alone in the world. 6 months after that first heat that had changed everything, Sophia gave birth to a daughter, a healthy, strong alpha female with her father's dark hair and her mother's green eyes. They named her Victoria Eleanor, honoring both the past and the present of the Blackwood line. As Sophia held her daughter for the first time, Dominic beside her, with undisguised wonder and pride on his face, she felt the final pieces of her new identity slide into place. She was still Sophia Morgan, still the independent, ambitious architect she had always been, but she was also Sophia Blackwood, Omega Queen, mother to the future Alpha Queen of the Northeast Territory. The woman who had woken in heat 9 months ago, desperate to maintain control of her life and terrified of losing her independence, had found something she hadn't known she was looking for: a partner who valued her strength, a community that respected her contributions, a purpose that encompassed but didn't eliminate her previous ambitions. One evening, as they stood on the balcony of the master suite they now shared, watching the moon rise over the estate, they ruled together. Dominic wrapped his arms around her from behind, their daughter sleeping peacefully in her bassinet nearby. "Any regrets?" he murmured against her hair. Sophia leaned back against him, feeling the mate bond thrum contentedly between them. "Not anymore," she said honestly. "You know, I spent 9 years running from what I am, from what biology dictated I should be. I thought surrender meant weakness, meant losing myself. And now," she turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had upended her carefully constructed life and given her something far richer in return. "Now I understand that sometimes the greatest strength comes from embracing what you've been fighting all along. Sometimes surrender isn't the end of freedom, but the beginning of something even more powerful." Dominic's expression softened as he gazed down at her. I love you, Sophia Blackwood. Not just because you're my mate, my queen, the mother of my child, but because you've taught me that true leadership means knowing when to hold firm and when to adapt, when to command, and when to listen. As they sealed this understanding with a kiss, Sophia reflected on the journey that had brought her here from that first frightening heat to this moment of profound contentment. She had fought against fate, against biology, against tradition. She had feared losing herself in the role thrust upon her. Instead, she had found herself more completely than she ever had before. Not despite the bond, but because of it. Not in opposition to her nature, but in harmony with it. The Omega Queen had found her throne not as a gilded cage, but as a platform from which to effect change to build a better world for her daughter and all those who would come after. And that Sophia realized was a fate worth embracing.